Nicole Lapin, I feel so outrageously excited to have this conversation. I feel so honored actually that you're on the show. I know that you've had such a prestigious career for so many years, educating people about money, educating people about investing in a way that does bring peace and playfulness to otherwise very serious topics. And I think you do this with such unique brilliance that allows people that normally might be scared of money or don't even want to hear about it. It's like they just want to lean in when you talk about money and when you talk about investing. And so, first of all, thank you for dedicating your brilliance to this topic. And thank you for the liberation that you have provided for so many people over the years. I'm so delighted to have you on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? And today, I want to talk about why isn't everyone investing? And I'm sure you have a long laundry list of reasons why people are not investing, but can you first sell us on why we should be investing? Like, what is the beauty of
Oh
investing?
my God. I think investing is the most beautiful force out there. Investing your money and having it work for you is beautiful because you work so hard for your money that I think it should return the favor. And the
Yes.
most orgasmic force in the investing world, Emily, is compound interest. Compound interest is is orgasmic and beautiful and gorgeous. And I often, this is not just for your show, I often describe it that way. It's truly
Wait,
where you,
pause. Wait, tell us please exactly why compound interest is orgasmic.
so compound interest is literally where your money makes money for you while you're doing nothing, while you're sleeping, while you're eating, while you're fucking. Like it is growing for you. It is working for you. And so oftentimes in the financial system, compound interest is used against us. So I was introduced to compound interest when I got into a bunch of credit card debt. And so compound interest is that same force that works against you when you're in debt. You can use that very same force and have it in your power and use it for you when you're investing. So as quickly as like your debt on your credit card snowballs out of control, you can take that back and have your money snowball for you into a bigger ball of money.
Yes. Okay, this is in fact orgasmic. This is very exciting. And I
Right?
I was so blessed. When I was in high school, I had a teacher, his name was Mr. Sandler. He was also the golf coach, he was the girls' golf coach, and he would just do math equation after math equation after math equation to try and drill into us the power and the beauty of compound interest. And it was like it's not even about how much you're investing. It's really about the length of time that that money is there. And I've recently learned that with specifically women, it's not just the pay gap that is hurting women financially, but even bigger than that, there's the investment gap. So can you speak a little bit to that? I mean, I'd like to hear about both the pay gap, but more importantly, right now, what is the investment gap?
Yeah, and Mr. Sandler was totally right. He points out this idea that you don't need a lot of money, you need the most time possible to make your money work for you, to build long-term, lasting, generational wealth. So the three things that often stand in our way are these are like the stories we tell ourselves that we don't know math, we're really bad at math, that we're too old, and that we don't have a lot of money to start. And so, just really quickly, I'll pick those apart. I was a poetry major, so
What?
I am like I am the least likely person to be a financial anything. I wanted to sit under a tree and write poetry all day long. So if I could figure out the math, I promise you can too. Like getting your financial life together, the math a fifth grader can do. It's all the humanities, it's all the emotional part that really stands in our way. The fact that we say we're too old, you're never as young as you are today. And as far as I'm concerned, today is as good a day as any. And finally, he underscored that final point of not needing a lot of money, but needing the most time possible to make your money work for you. So I think that when we're looking at a wage gap, we've closed it a little bit, but the real issue with making more money and just leaving it in our checking accounts is this investment gap. And so I think we're making more money, which is amazing as women, but I have girlfriends too. And I think we spoke about this at the conference we met at, where they sold their companies for a bunch of money and it's literally just sitting in their Bank of America account. And there's tons and tons of money not working for them. And money, capital is so powerful because you can use money that you made to make more money without doing anything. And that's like the ultimate passive income. There are a lot of entrepreneurial experts out there that will talk about all these like weird ways to make money. Like the tried and true one is to put your money to work in whatever investment. You can start with lower risk in bonds, and then in the stock market. But it's so powerful to put it to work, and having it just sit there, I think you're absolutely right, is a huge, huge gap that we should try to fill because dudes are doing it.
I'm totally guilty of this. Like I think it was, I think it provided me some level of security or the liquidity where it was like, okay. And I had spent, I was talking about being a poetry major. I was a musical theater major and I was on Broadway for 10 years. And so I was very much paycheck to paycheck, living in my fifth floor walk up. And, I spent 10 years in that sort of lifestyle. So I didn't really have much excess. I didn't have, quote unquote money to save or invest. But really, if I had been putting $100 a month, $200 a month when I was 22 and on Broadway, like what would be happening now at 45 to that money? So I'm just, I'm carrying on to the myth. However, when I started making money, when I started a business and I started having some amount of money, I think it was an emotional piece of like, oh, I just want to keep this money in the checking account because it's here. I can like touch it. It feels more available to me. And so I didn't really start investing it until much later. So can you speak to what is that emotional gap? Like when you said it was the humanities piece, it's the social and emotional piece. What is that you see, or what are trends that you see coming up preventing people from investing?
Yeah, it's the fear. It's the fear of losing it. I mean, in my last book, Miss Independent, I did a recap of a bunch of studies that have been done on little boys and little girls. And little boys use like these power words when it comes to money. And little girls use all these scarcity words, like all these fearful words when it comes to money. And so I think this has been socialized forever. And that's fine. Like, I don't think we should ignore those mores and, societal pressures. We should acknowledge them and then we can do something about them. I think that women are brought up to be more fearful of money, and there is an overall prevalence in the idea that a guy is just going to figure it out. Like I've had and spoken to countless women and their moms, by the way, at a bunch of book events who say like, oh yeah, she went to, fill in the blank amazing school, but like I just want her to marry a rich man. I'm like, lady, what year are we in? Is this a joke? And I think that there's still this idea that like a guy is gonna figure it out. I've had women on the show that were in financial services, were in investing, had their CPAs, like went through, their MBA and let a guy do it, and they got screwed too. And so I think that there is just this really, really deep-rooted idea that we can't do it, and that somehow other people, like Wall Street people, are smarter, or guys are smarter with money, or something like that. And so, yeah, I think that it's the fear. It's the fear of not knowing. And I think money to me is just a language, like anything else. Like, when I started, I grew up in an immigrant family, super broken home, like didn't know anything about money. I got a job and I lied to get a job. And I said I knew about financial news and I didn't. And then what I realized, and this was when I was 18, so 100,000 years ago.
Approximately.
See, like, I'm not great at math, but más o menos. Yeah, I realized that like if you if you don't speak the language of money or Wall Street and you go there, you're going to be really scared and really confused. In the same way as like if you go to Japan and you don't speak Japanese, you'll be really confused. And then you speak the language and you're like, "Oh, duh, that wasn't oh, of course that's what it meant," because you actually spoke the language. And so I think it's that fear that's standing in our way.
And so, what is the language of money, and how would one even begin to learn it if they don't yet?
Well, maybe the reason I've been single and I'm a stone throw away from 40 is because I rewrite financial dictionaries in the back of all of my books in a way you don't need a dictionary to understand. So maybe start there if you want.
Okay, so the back of your books, you actually like write down words and you redefine them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a crazy person like that. Yeah. So like I just have Miss Independent in front of me. But yeah, like short is not the opposite of tall. It's the opposite of long, and it means something's going in the pooper. Like equity is the same as stock. Like it just is another fancy word. I mean, there's just these jargony words that I think are the things that stand in our way. And once you understand the concept, you're like, oh, duh, like I figured out harder things. We've all figured out harder things in life. Here I am with like my fake money. Pardon me.
I just want everyone to know that Nicole has a money gun in her
I have
podcast
2 money
studio, and she's
guns.
not afraid to use it.
Definitely not.
But seriously, it's like thank you for putting that dictionary in the back of your books, because I think it's exactly that. It's jargon. Just like there's legalese to keep lawyers employed, I think there's also like money-ese, right? There's like
Yeah.
money-lese or whatever the money like jargon is. And that's to keep financial advisors employed, to keep so that we feel confused about our own money. And I think some of that is likely on purpose. And I think it's not exactly the same, but I see similar levels of conditioning happening around finance and money as I do around sex and sexuality, because it's like we're swimming in our parents' fear around money as much as we're swimming in our parents' conditioning around sexuality. And so it's so pervasive that sometimes we cannot even see it. And so I oftentimes will have people go down and write down their relationship. What was your mom's relationship with money? What was your dad's relationship with money? And then can you see yourself yo-yoing between those two ways of being when it comes to your own finances? And similar with sexuality, it's like if we're just fed that it's like bad and wrong and shameful our whole lives, then how on earth are you supposed to see the sacredness of it to reclaim it as your own? So if someone is starting out on their journey and they had parents that were very much coming from lack mentality, like where would you have them that start to create a sense of safety? Like, is it in education? Is it in language? Or where would you have someone start?
Oh, it's such a good question because it all does really stem from our upbringings, and we all have financial trauma, whether or not your parents sat around the kitchen table with you reading the Wall Street Journal and like putting money into a Roth IRA for you and starting to build your credit when you were a baby, or not. Like we all have trauma, whether it's in our friend group too, or in just the macro economy. So I grew up, I have all the financial traumas. Like I talk about bailing my mother out of jail using the cash under the sink behind the maxi pads when I was in middle school. Like these are some of my early memories, like super, super heavy memories of money that had affected everything in the way that I viewed money. Or you can have, if you're like Lapin, my trauma isn't that bad. Everybody has something, like, and if it's something to you, it's something. The trauma is not a competition, as you know. But like, I also grew up in the housing crisis, right? I saw my house foreclosed on, my family home foreclosed on. So that affects me. But we all might have, we all lived through the pandemic, right? And so that affects us, or the dot-com crash. Maybe, you knew people in that world. And then maybe your friend group like hoards or hides purchases from their significant others, or are in a lot of debt or spend frivolously. It's all layered in the way that you've grown up with your family and sort of the other circles that you're in, for sure.
And just to add to that, because I just did a Mastering Your Money call just before this. It's a day of money for me.
Love it.
And there was a woman who said that she grew up in Kuwait
Mm.
and she grew up very, very safe. Like she said that she felt held in her country. She said if someone lost her job, that the country would take care of her. And there was a level of abundance happening there. And then when she moved to America and she moved to Los Angeles and suddenly she was in the highest tax bracket and she started, and then people would say things like, oh, it's expensive. And she would see people living on the street and homeless people. And she said that slowly over time, it really changed her relationship and the way that she would speak about and the way she felt about money. And that was a layer I had never thought about, is just even your country. Like, what is the financial infrastructure inside of your country? And does it have an emotional layer of safety for you or not? And how does that impact your relationship with finances?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you lived in a communist country, or there's so many layers of like macroeconomic all the way to microeconomic, like within your family. And ultimately, the only thing you can control is yourself. As you know, we can't control any of the other economic forces. You can only control like your own little microeconomy. And I think the way to do that, I use a lot of what I learned in therapy to talk about finances because they're all smushed together, as you know. And I love doing a DBT class, dialectical behavioral therapy. And
Ooh, okay.
and it's
Can you
become
give us the Cliff Notes on what DBT is?
yes, it's become more popularized now that like Selena Gomez and Lady Gaga talk about their love of DBT too. It's like in the
Right.
same family as CBT, you might have heard of too. That's cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's this idea that two things can be true at the same time, that dialectical thing. Like I could love my significant other and be really mad at him. Like I don't have to only, like be mad at him and then that means I don't love him, right? Both things that seem opposing can be true at the same time. And so part of that and part of the work that I did in that course was around this idea that ultimately moving forward successfully with a lot of trauma is forgiving your former self for what she didn't know, but also giving your future self tough love because like now you know it, so now it's time to do better. And so I
Ooh.
really love that sweet spot when it comes to money. So saying like to, former Emily, who was like going up her walk up and like being hot on Broadway and like spending money, like whatever, doing New York fabulous things and not, investing a couple $100. Like let's forgive her. She didn't know. She was doing the best she could. She was like rocking it on Broadway and whatever. But now like she knows. And so now it's not okay. And so I think like this came up with my parents too and sort of the upbringing. Like, okay, well I could say they were fucked up and they didn't teach me anything and I had terrible money habits and so like, and what? Right? Like I could bury my head in the sand and then not make money and just blame them. No. Okay. It's, just because it was done a certain way doesn't mean it's the way it needs to be done. And so I think we all have that moment where it can, by the way, be the same as it's always been done. But it's like up to you to decide. It's kind of like when I became vegetarian, my family ate meat and I was like, do I like meat? Right? Like you need that moment. And I decided, no, I don't. But I could have decided yes. And so it's like where you ask yourself, like, is this for me? Is this the way I want to live? And so, yeah, I think we all should find that place with money where we're addressing the financial traumas that were and saying like, okay, we see them. They sucked. Let them speak. And then say, okay, well, let's put our big girl, big boy pants on and say, now we have the information. Now we can do it differently than what we saw. And that those habits, if they were bad, they're not okay anymore. Because I have the
This
resources
is
and I can choose.
so brilliant, Nicole. It's so good. And I just want to double click on this idea of we're going to forgive our former selves, but we want to give our future selves some tough love. That dialectical idea feels so, so powerful. And like you said, could be applied to almost anything, but let's apply it to money. Let's apply it to investing. Let's forgive our former selves for not investing $50, $3,000, whatever you could have. Let's forgive them for whatever traumas they were swimming in. And let's hold our current and our future selves feet to the fire so that when we are 60, 70, 80 years old, that we are doing it in style, that we are taking
Yes.
our friends on yachts and,
Yes,
creating
queen.
adorable retirement communities and doing LSD with our friends. And have you heard there's like a giant like
Sign me
psychedelic
up.
outbreak happening in retirement homes?
I love this. I love this for our future selves. They're going to be
Me too.
like bestie retirees. Those little communities too. Have you seen them where like the girlfriends get the little yurts or huts or something and all
Yes.
just live together?
I
Fabulous
think because
Golden
I
Girls
think
style.
right now the female life expectancy is longer than the male, and so there's all these women that are living together in these retirement communities.
That's real too. And that's another reason why we need to get our money life in order because we're
Yeah.
going to live
Yeah,
longer,
it's
which is
like, okay,
great.
we're gonna be outliving
But that costs
people.
money.
And I also like what you said of like, I get to decide, like, do I like meat or not? Your choice. Do I want to eat this? Do I want to put this in my body or not? What do I want my relationship with money to be? Do I like money or not? Would I like to have a lot of it or not? I get to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say that someone chooses yes. They're like, I love money. I want to have more of it. I want my money working for me. Nicole has sold me. I want to start investing. Where should we start?
I mean, I'm glad that you decided that money is amazing. It's an amazing tool. It's just that, a tool. It can be used for good or evil, like, any tool. A hammer can be used to build a house or to tear it down. It's how you use it. And I say, and this is where your incredible work comes in, is that money without meaning is just paper. And so it's the meaning that you apply to it is like, let's get the money first and then we can figure out the meaning component, but first we need the money. And so if you're deciding today is the day, hell yeah, you need a brokerage account. So there's a bank account and a brokerage account. So hopefully you have a bank account at least, and that will be, where you put your savings, your checking account, like a Bank of America, Chase type of account. A brokerage is different. I just had somebody on the show who thought they bought Apple stock at the Apple store, which is, like, how else would they know where to buy Apple stock? And they were like, I went to the Apple store and I couldn't buy Apple stock. Well, first of all, if you can buy an iPhone, you can buy stock. There's stocks that are, I think Apple is less than $200 Apple stock right now. I don't know what an iPhone is right now, but it's probably close
Like
to
1,100.
$1,000. Right. You can buy a
Yeah.
few shares of Apple stock if you can buy an iPhone right now. And you buy that through a brokerage, so not through the store, even though there are a lot of companies that you use every single day that you can invest in and you can be, a shareholder in. But a brokerage would be like a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a Schwab or an E-Trade. None of them, these companies pay me to endorse it. They can if they'd like, but they're all the same, honestly. It's like whatever brokerage I like for you is the one you're actually going to stick to and use, because ultimately they're very, very similar. Like if you like the
And they have
coloring,
similar fees. Like that was the
totally.
advice I always got, was just make sure you're doing like a low fee index fund. And I was like, what does that even mean? But I was like, oh, well, if they're charging like a 1% fee, but you're only making 4 or 5%, that's like 20% of what your money is earning.
Yes.
So like a low fee index fund. And I think
Talk
Vanguard does have
dirty to
low ones.
me.
I know. I
They
will.
all have low cost ones, which is the advice, or actually what Warren Buffett put in his will for his wife, one of the greatest investors of our time. He told his wife to put his own money, their money, 90% in low cost S&P 500 index funds, and we can double click on what those are, and then 10% in bonds. But yeah, over time, like beating the market, this idea that you're going to find somebody that's going to beat the market is just fake. Over time, the market has yielded 7 to 10% inflation adjusted. And so to take advantage of that, 1% is a really high fee, just to sort of put this in perspective. You want much lower than that when you're, because they add and they eat into your returns, as you rightly know. So you should be very mindful of that. Mutual funds are also notoriously high on fees. Those are like more actively managed accounts versus passive funds like an index fund. But like, I'm probably throwing down way too much jargon. So like, let's step back. And so what the fuck is an index fund? First of all, what is an index? An index, do we know what that is, Emily?
I don't. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's like where like you list all the companies, like where the stocks of the companies are being reported. Like Apple went up, Facebook went down, and then in the next, like in the fund, you're having different companies in your portfolio. But I
Kind
don't know what
of,
an
kind of.
index is.
So, like, have you listened to the news and heard the Dow is up or the Dow is down or
Yeah.
the Nasdaq or the S&P 500? Those are up or down.
Yeah.
Those are indexes. So,
Okay.
so the Dow is an index of 30 of the biggest companies out there, and so the Nasdaq is a much more tech-heavy index. The S&P 500, guess how many companies are in that one? Like the 500,
500.
yay! The biggest stocks are
Right,
in
the
there.
money gun.
Yes, exactly. And so when you're buying into an index fund, you're buying a little baby piece of all of those companies, basically. The different funds track in different ways, but the way to find a index fund that is, so there's index funds that are ETFs and there's index funds that are mutual funds. And so if you open up a brokerage account, I've also had somebody on the show who said they typed in index fund and nothing came up. Nothing is going to come up if you type in just index fund. You have to type in what's called a ticker symbol, and a ticker symbol is like basically the address for what this fund is. And so really popular low-cost S&P 500 index funds, I'm not endorsing them. Do your own research, but like take a look at companies like SPY or VOO, and those would be low-cost S&P 500 index funds that we talked about. And buying in to one of those, you buy built-in diversification across all these 500 companies. What I like about the S&P 500, and Warren does too, is that like if you invest in that index, it will kick out the shitty companies if something happens to them, because like part of the index is like you have to be a certain market cap and you have to be in good standing and all of these things. And so if something happens to one of those companies, it gets kicked out, and you know, another more legit, you know, steadfast company gets replaced within that. So
In that case, it's like you don't have to do any real research on the companies because the index is doing the filtering for you. Like they're saying these are the top
Exactly.
500 most sure bets. And if somebody goes to 501, then, you know, then they get kicked out. Someone else gets on the list. And it's an built-in diversification. If
Yeah.
I would say if there's any like across the board financial advice that you hear, it's don't try to beat the market
Yeah.
and diversify.
Totally. And
Right?
buy
So
low, sell high, which is great advice. Like there's only a couple truisms on Wall Street. Buy low, sell high is one of them. It's better to beat low expectations is another one, which I also think applies to other aspects of life. But
But wouldn't you say that how is buy low, sell high not trying to beat the market?
so what's hard about buying low and selling high is you don't know where the low is and you don't know where the high is. But there's a method called dollar cost averaging that can kind of safeguard you from that and not knowing, like, unless you're psychic, in which case, please tell me where the market is going. That would be
Give us a call.
amazing.
Give us some tips.
But where our emotions really come in and can hurt us when it comes to investing. And this is also where I'm excited about AI when it comes to investing, because it takes some of this human emotion out of it. Like when the market crashes, Emily, like during the beginning, the darkest days of the pandemic, you know, I would get lots of DM slips and I would do like lives nonstop. I mean, these are the fun, sexy kinds of DM slips I get. Like, do I sell my funds? Do I liquidate my 401k? Like, and so, but like the textbook answer is no, that stuff is now on sale. That stuff is low. That is the time to buy, not to sell. Yeah. But our emotions get the best of us. Or if we're flying high and we're like, oh my God, I'm a genius. I bought this one individual stock, which I don't recommend for, you know, newbie investors. And it's going to the moon. Might as well like buy more. No, that's high. You sell high. You don't buy high. But naturally we have a proclivity to do the opposite, which is why a lot of motion gets in the way, because all this stuff that we're bringing into a money conversation gets in the way, right? Then I start having flashbacks of like cash, like bailing my mother out of jail, right? Like, oh my God, I'm not going to have enough. I'm like this scarcity mentality. And like I was told when I was a kid to turn off the lights to save money, or to, flush the toilet only if it was number 2 to save money. And these are like real
It's
things.
yellow, let it mellow.
You get me.
I get you.
But like now I flush the toilet like gratuitously, and I leave all the lights on.
And is that like
because
just
I
a
can.
reclamation of worthiness?
Because I can. Like people will say, well, what are the signs of that you have enough or that you feel rich? And usually people, if they really stop to think about it in a thoughtful way, it's not like the money in their bank account. It's those little things that make you feel like you've made it. Like being able to leave the lights on makes me feel really awesome, and doesn't have anything to do with what's in my bank account. And and I think that when coming up with financial goals, before you do any of this investing stuff, like you need to first come up with goals, which might sound trite, but coming up with a random number means nothing. If you're like, yeah, my goal is to have $1 million. Cool. Like $1 million is great. But what do you want to do with that $1 million? Maybe you need more than $1 million. Maybe you need less than $1 million. I have no idea. Like first figure out the life you want, and then reverse engineer to figure out how to get the money to live that life, and not just come up with a number. Because it's like, hey, Emily, I want to go to a party in LA. Like you have a lot of questions about that party, as I would, right? What am I wearing? What's the address? We can't just jump in the Uber. Like, are there going to be snacks? Will I be fed? Like I have so many questions. You should have the same questions about the destination of your financial life, right? You can't just jump in and like go. Like the Uber's going to be like, ladies, I need an address, and you need an address for your financial life too.
Ooh, this feels like a really big, really important spiritual concept that you are relating in such a relatable way. And the spiritual concept, as I understand it, is that money wants to feel safe. Like money actually wants to know where it is going. And if we're just chasing a number, that can be a trauma response, or like a fear-based reaction to not feeling safe in our own bodies, and thinking, well, once I have $1 million, or once I have $10 million, or whatever the amount of zeros is, then I will feel safe, is very different than what you said, is figure out what kind of life you want to have, and then allow the money to serve that life, because that's going to be outrageously unique to you. That's going to be your soul's desire. And then the money feels safe enough to come in and support that dream and desire, versus money's not going to support your trauma instigated lack, or looking to money externally to solve an internal issue. And so that feels really, really profound. Like, where is the destination for this money? The Uber driver is going to need an address for the party. I love that. And that's also uniquely, I think we get out of greed when you're actually listening to like, what is my soul's desire here, right? Because the amount of money, the kind of life that you want is likely different than the kind of life that I want. And neither one is good or bad. And then it's not a competition of who has more. It's like, is the money supporting the life that you have designed for yourself? That feels very, very liberating and very exciting to me.
It's true. And this is how we get in those spirals of competition, stealing our joy and looking at other people and what they might have. And it's easy to do it because a random number, is never going to be enough, ever. Like you will constantly change the goalpost on yourself. If you tell me $1 million, today, and, in 5 years you get $1 million, it's going to be like, well, then what about 2 million or 3? Like we constantly change the goalpost on what success is mid-game. And I don't know a lot of like sports analogies, but, when we do that to ourselves, we're destined to fail. But what's cool about this is like we get to write the rules. So we're destined to win the game, but first we have to like figure out what those rules are. And there are rules. Nobody, like only you have to wake up in your life and what you do with your money. And so when people do the doom scroll and they're like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything with my life, you know, so and so is on a yacht or whatever, and like I suck. It's like, hold on, was a yacht on your list? Like, was that even your goal? Like, you
And
know,
did you even make that list?
exactly. And so if you're not measuring to those metrics, and this is what you do in business, right? Like you're destined to feel like a failure. And trying to find external solutions for internal problems, those never exist. I figured that out the hard way.
That sounds like maybe a fun podcast for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this idea that a lot of people think they might be too old, right? Because we talked about I don't have enough to invest. Because we're looking at the reasons why isn't everyone investing. They think that they don't have enough. They think that they don't understand it. They don't have math, and then they think that they're too old to start. Because the power of compound interest. I'm now 20 years late, and I'm having a little bit of this as well. Like I'm likely going to buy my first house this year. And so I had mentioned to a few different people that, I'll need a certain amount of money liquid in order to make the down payment. And this was maybe last summer. And there was a lot of talk of like the market crashing and there's a big correction coming. And like 4 different people that I very, very much trust were like, you should likely sell your S&P 500. So I go through Vanguard, which is the VOO, like VOO, my low index fund.
Yeah.
I had some money, and which I was dollar cost averaging. I just had money
Hey,
direct.
Emily.
I know. Am I turning you on a
So
little bit?
much. I love this for you.
have
And we should talk about what dollar cost averaging is too, if you want, because we
Okay,
mentioned it.
so I'll just say like really quickly for mine, and then you can explain it.
Yeah.
I would just have like a certain amount of money come out of my checking every quarter and go into my like investment account, and then I had to physically move it into my index fund, but it was at least there. Like that money, like I didn't see it to spend it. It just came out once a quarter. And then I would put it into the S&P 500. So I've been doing that for a couple of years. I started right at the top of the market. I really started when things were high. So I violated that rule. But then there was talk of like, oh, market's going to crash. There's going to be a big housing correction. And I didn't want for it to crash and then me need a few $100,000 for a down payment for a house and not be available. So, and since right now, T-bills are high, like you can get pretty much like guaranteed 5% interest on T-bills. I moved that money into T-bills. But then the market just kept going up and up and up and up and the correction never happened. And so now I feel like a ding dong. And in my mind, I have a story that I've lost all of that time. That like all of that time that I had of my gains on the S&P 500 is gone now. Even though it's not totally true because I at least got the 5% with the T-bills. But really, I'm just turning this into my personal therapy session. But sometimes I think that working through someone's specific problem can have a universal implication. So I guess the question is, what would you say to me now having feel like I've lost that time or lost that compound interest power? Or what would you say to someone that they think that they're too late or too old to start?
Okay, well, first of all, Emily, can we forgive our former selves? She did the best she could. We can't go back and get that time. We can always get more money, by the way. We can't get more time. Time is our most valuable asset. So we can't go back. Like, you made the move. You did the best you could. You thought you were going to beat the market or like beat a correction or whatever. And we've decided that that cannot be done. Unless you were talking to some really dope psychic, at slow and steady wins the race when it comes to investments, like putting your blinders on for the long term and really not looking at it. It's not about day trading, it's long-term investing. And so you were totally spot on with dollar cost averaging. Essentially, if you had $12,000, I would say don't put it all in the market today. Space it out like $1,000 a month for easy math. So you're trying to get like the average of where the market is going to be so you can get in, on ultimately like where it would be for the entire year instead of putting it all in one day. So let's forgive former Emily.
Okay.
She did great.
Her. She was doing the best she could. She wanted that money for the house. She thought the market was going to crash maybe.
She was trying to take care of herself. She was trying to get an amazing house. And she also got 5% in interest, which is, the highest T-bills, which are treasury like short-term treasury bonds have been in a really long time. So who knows? Like the market could have gone in the pooper and you could have come out like with 5% more than everybody else. And so you did great for what you know now. And so now what do we know moving forward?
Now we know we can't beat the market, that we want to dollar cost average, we want to buy low, sell high. But the thing is, like, I don't even know if things are low or high now. Like, what would you say things are? I mean, this will be released in who knows when. But like, would you say the market is high or low right now? And
But it
how would you
doesn't
make that
matter.
determination?
Like, because ultimately, when you look at charts, we can manipulate charts to look any way we want, right? Depending on the timeline. So if you look at like a little baby chart of the last month or something, you're like, oh my God, we're at a high right now. But like zoom out more. And so before I invest in anything or before I talk to folks about first time investing, like look at those bigger charts. You'll see them on your brokerage accounts. Like zoom out to 5 years, zoom out to 10 years. Like if you're just looking at one portion of the chart, and this is like a life lesson in general, like if you're looking at just one part of the picture, you're missing the whole thing. And the only 2 days that matter, Emily, there's only two in investing. There's the day you buy and the day you sell. And the rest of it is like noise. And so did you lose money? Like when people tell me, oh my God, like my portfolio, I just lost so much money. Like, did you lose money? Or did you put the money in when it was like $5 and then it went up to $100 and now it's back to $50? Did you lose that $50 or did you make $45 if you sold that today? It doesn't matter. Like this other noise, we really, get emotionally attached to it and we see like, oh, what it could have been. And I think that when you're doing long-term investment strategies, which is like buy something, hold it for long periods of time, because when I talk about the market getting 7 to 10%, that's over time, like big data sets that we like to see and that we can get sort of these trend lines.
And you said that was adjusted for inflation, 7 to 10% adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, so inflation typically grows at about 3%. So we saw some cuckoo banana stuff happen in the last few years. That's not typical, but 3% is historically what inflation has grown at. And so you want your money to at least make 3% for you, because otherwise you're losing money actually if you're not doing that. Like you're losing 3% of your purchasing power. Inflation is just, the force that makes things more expensive than they were yesterday, right? Movie tickets were $5 when we were growing up, and I don't even know. I haven't been to a movie in a long time, but like 20 bucks.
Like 20. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's inflation. And it's also important to compare things in an inflation adjusted way. So when people have a home buying conversation with me, they're like, well, grandma bought this house for, $250,000 and now it's $1 million. She sold it for $1 million. Like it's the best investment ever. It's like, okay. I mean, how much were movie tickets when grandma bought that house too? And like, if we adjust for inflation, did she actually earn more money over time than she would have made in the market? Like a house is a whole different conversation. A house is very emotionally charged, and buying a house for emotional reasons is, as far as I'm concerned, just as good as any other reason. But if you're looking at like your first home, just your one purchase, you're not making money. There's a lot of, people that will say you're throwing money away by renting. I disagree. There's a cost of living. There's a lot of fees that you don't get back when you buy a home either. Closing costs, interest, all the stuff you have to fix, insurance, all of it. And so I think, anyway, let's forgive former Emily. Let's say moving forward, now you have all the tools and we're going to use them. That's it.
We're going to use the tools. And then and again, this is 100% self-serving and selfish, but like any tips for home buyers, first time or otherwise, like anything that you would, because a lot of people would say as a diversification, like sure, you have some in the market, sure, maybe you have some in real estate, maybe you have some in cryptocurrency, or like as a broad, maybe some in gold or precious metals. But any investing advice as far as your home goes, or even real estate at large?
I think it's another one of those conversations that you have with yourself, and you're like, why do I want this? Is it because I've always been told that this is the road to financial freedom, or independence? And we have been told that. And it is one road, and home buying can be great for some people. It's just, I wouldn't say it's universally great for everybody. It's not the universal like ticket to becoming wealthy. And so when you're looking at home buying, I would look at the whole picture. You know, I've had people come up at events and say like, how can I buy a home? It's like, well, hold on. Like, do you have debt? Do you have an emergency fund? You can't go to the grocery store and pay with your mortgage, right? Like, God forbid something happens. What we saw, you know, in the last few years is that crazy black swan events happen, which are things we can't predict. You know, terrorist attacks, pandemics, you know, and then in sort of your own circle, like your significant other, something happens, God forbid, they can't work, or, you know, whatever it is. So having an emergency fund is really, really important before you go into that, even having that discussion.
An emergency fund, you would say like, what's your, I know some people like 3 months, a year living expenses. What's your recommendation there?
It depends on what kind of job you have. If you have precarious income, so if you're a real estate agent, or you know, you work on commission, if you're a model, you know, if you fluctuate a lot, then I would say 6 to 9 months of bare bones expenses in the bank, and something that's liquid. So even low risk investments like CDs, those are not liquid. You can't, and liquid just means like, I think of it like an ice cube. You know, when you're really thirsty, you know, you can't drink from a frozen water bottle. So you need something that's liquid, and like a house is not a liquid asset either. So yeah, I would say if you have something that's much more stable, and your overall financial picture, then like down to 3 months makes sense, of like the brown rice and beans diet. This is what I used to eat because it felt fancier than ramen when I had no money.
I would say, yeah, I think rice and beans, there's a beautiful mixture that happens of the protein and the
Yes.
starch.
Yes.
I think there's some macrobiotic truth to that.
Yes. Throw in a little seaweed. I don't know. What else is in macrobiotic stuff?
Yeah, sure, you give them the nutritional yeast or something.
Perfect.
Who knows? Yeah, everything you need. So when we were preparing for this show, you said that you would love to bring playfulness and peace to the subject of money that can be so charged with fear, so charged with scarcity. So how have you been able to find playfulness and peace around your personal finances? And then, I guess, extrapolating from that, how would you help other people to bring a sense of playfulness and peace when they look at their bank account?
It's not easy. And there are days that I stress out myself looking at money for very illogical reasons. And then I remember, you know, these greatest hits of this bean girl inside my head. And I have to tell her to take several seats because I have like old hits that sometimes come back and play. You know, fear of dying alone, broken, homeless, in the gutter, right? Like I think of them as logs on a river or something. And I'm like, yo, what's up? Nice to see you. Like fear of abandonment. Cool. Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
nice to see
Hi,
you.
old friend. And so, you know, I'd be lying if I said there was a point where, you know, you reach enlightenment, and there's not. And I think that the language also keeps changing. My last book, I snuck in like NFTs and cryptocurrency because once you learn the language, there's more to learn. Once you realize, once you've learned something, you realize that there's more to learn ultimately. And so the same thing goes with finances. It's, you know, it's not this idea that you found it, you're done. It's constantly in motion. You know, it's like I think of general balance, and I think of financial balance and financial mindfulness. These are like similar tools that you can use when you're getting your financial life together. So like balance can be used as a noun and a verb. oftentimes people say like, I found balance, like it's right there. It's like, no, I think of it as it's something that's constantly in motion, something that you constantly have to cultivate. And you had a lifetime of bad habits. And so only a lifetime of good habits are going to be able to counteract that, I think. So it's the maintenance. It's like, you don't just go to a gym, get in sick shape and like never go again and expect it to stay the same. It's the same thing can be said about a financial advisor too. You could look at that as a personal trainer, go and get the plan and then do the reps and do that yourself. But what keeps me going is, the idea that having money keeps you out of situations you don't want to be in. And growing up in my own abusive situation, I look at money as complete choice and freedom. Women who I keep going and teaching others about this, primarily women, because I think a lot of women stay in bad relationships or abusive relationships because they're scared of making their own money. And that breaks my heart. Or bad work situations because they don't have a choice. And so money affords you that choice, which I think is priceless.
Yeah, freedom. Like I would say freedom is definitely like a high priority for me in my life. And that sounds beautiful. And I feel like you really have brought a sense of, I'm going to say play. I know that you were putting that at me, but there's a lightness, there's a joy, there is a sense of almost glee that you have when you're doing your work. Even if you're reporting on like the most dense, like quote unquote, like boring financial news, like you make it gleeful, you make it playful, you make it pleasurable. And I think if that is not, and I just want to celebrate your unique transmission in that, because I know that so many people are attracted to you. And then because they are attracted to you, they have opened themselves up to this world of finance. And I think that's a really beautiful gift that you have offered the species. So thank you. Yeah. So is there anything that you wish that I had asked? Is there anything that you're like, people really need to know this? And it could be anything from cryptocurrency, NFT, like what is next, or even like some of the basics that I might have missed.
I think that
And I think,
when it comes to relationships too, one of the big causes of fights or even breakups is money. And so I think that it's an important conversation to figure out for yourself, because, you have to put your oxygen mask on first, ultimately, with any of these conversations. The ones that are trickiest, right, are talking to your significant other about money. Like at different steps, you're going to have different money conversations. When you're moving in together, whose name is the bills under? How are you going to split things? Are you going to get a prenup? Are you like later on in life, a will, an advance directive? These are, not super fun, sexy conversations, but you can make them that way if you reframe them around this idea that, goals have price tags and a dream without a plan is just a wish, and wishes are amazing, but they don't pay the bills. And like dreaming together is sexy, right? Having these discussions, getting on the same page about money can be sexy. And if you don't do it, they just get harder and worse. And so when I say humanities, it's not just romantic relationships. It's getting your friends to pay you back, right? It's those interpersonal conflicts and trying to figure out effectiveness in, getting friends, if you're on a budget, to go to, a more affordable restaurant for dinner. Or, how do you talk to your friend who's getting married, who chose a really expensive destination wedding, and talking about how you want to stay on track. Or if they borrowed money and they didn't give it back to you, and then they posted, photos on Instagram of like living it up, and you're like, yo, where's my money? These are really hard conversations. And so money generally is, I think, the last taboo. I think we'll more readily talk about sexy time than money. Even with my girlfriends, I'll be at dinner and be like, we've just talked about her landing strip and like all sorts of, bowel
Intimate
movements
details.
and whatever, everything, like all of it. And then I'm like, so, like how much are you making now? Or, what are you investing in, or what are you saving? And it's crickets, because it's just loaded with a bunch of other stuff. And I come to it from wanting to help. But I think we're so scared of this conversation. And the only way to alleviate that fear is to go first. And so that's what I've done. I've just gone first. And I think any hard conversation, somebody has to go first. So if you want to have the conversation and your significant other is like not doing it, then you go first. If you want to know what your friends are making, or if they're in similar industries, you tell them first how much you're making. That's what I've done. I mean, in all my books, I wrote how much I made for the book, because I thought I can't tell people to talk about it and not talk about it myself.
Like what your book advance was, or what you were
All of
making
it.
at that time in your career?
All of it. I've talked
Right.
about what I made at CNN, at CNBC early on in my career for my advances, what I make at
Well, now
speaking.
there's like the great website Glassdoor. You know that website where it's like you can post salaries, and so you can see like what's a comparable salary in this industry in this town, which I think is amazing. But I want to go back to this idea of romantic relating, and where you said like this can be a really challenge. Obviously, like sex and money, I think are the reason that reason why people get together, and also the reason why people break up. But what I am noticing, and I don't know if I'm just in a microcosm or if you're seeing this happening more macro, but a generation of like, I'm mid 40s, right? So a generation of women who, like, my mom couldn't have a credit card until, she would have been like in her 30s or 40s before like women were legally allowed to have credit cards.
Yeah.
And then she ended up becoming vice president of a bank and like running a mortgage division of
Oh,
a company. And so I was really like, I was lucky that I had her as a model, and I had her as a model as like the sole breadwinner in our family and the primary parent. And so I have this lineage of like women who are literally doing it all, like making all of the money and doing all the domestic labor. And so now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, this is not, I don't choose that. Like I can do it. Great. I did it. Check all the boxes. Hooray. I am capable of this, and I don't choose it. Like I want to be in my feminine. I want to be in my soft queen era. And I'm seeing so many of my friends, these like very high powered, very intelligent, multi seven figure entrepreneur women who are either not in relationships or are in relationships and have fully emasculated their partners. And so now there's obviously an emotional component to this, right? Where there's like some level of abuse or trauma that is coming from like the wounded masculine. But specifically in regards to money, like how have you seen that dynamic playing out of like women making more money than men, and what is the impact there, and how can we have healthy conversations around that?
woo! We just started a whole other podcast.
I know,
I'm
I know.
so glad you asked, truly. And it was really interesting what you said about your mom, that you can do that, but you don't want to do that. And I think about that a lot when it comes to relationships. I will not pay on a first date, period, the end, hard pass. And it's not because I cannot pay. It's not because I can't buy the whole restaurant, probably, or everybody's meal at the restaurant. It's because I don't want to. And there is a huge power and a huge difference to that. I am very masculine in my work. I literally wrote the book Boss Bitch. In my personal relationship, I really love being in my feminine energy. I just love it. I want to swim in there, and it's like a balance that I personally want to have. So if you want to go splitsies when you go out, I think ultimate feminism is not telling other women what to do and saying like, you do you, but this works for me, and that's it. And I think that having that distinction between can and want is really important. There are so many money conversations that, really ruin relationships. Prenups is a huge one. And I think reframing that for women is really important. I hear a lot that he made me sign a prenup, or like he's making me do this. Like, first of all, like, do you have your own stuff? Like I have a prenup ready to go. So, why can't we take this conversation back and be like, okay, well, I'm protecting myself too. And I think,
Actually, I'll just give a little word to the wise there. So in my last marriage, my ex-husband, created a prenup, was advocating for a prenup, and I was all for it. I was game. However, and this wasn't any sort of manipulation, it was just logistics. Like we were just deep in wedding planning. And then by the time everything got approved, by the time he gave me the prenup, we were 48 hours out from the wedding. And I'm dealing with like seating charts, and it's like a wedding. Like I'm Southern. I wanted a big wedding. It was in South Carolina. Like I was like full blown wedding. And I was like, I am happy to do this, but not right now. Like I cannot deal with this right now in this moment. And so they ended up being a post-nup, which is fine. Like just like nothing really changes. You can still totally do a post-nup, even if it's after the wedding. However, at this moment in time, I was like, just coming out of Broadway. I was in my meditation teacher training. I'm making like $0.00. He was a tech executive. And at this moment in time, if you were to take a snapshot of us in this moment, it looked like he would always have and make much more money than me. And he actually like drew it out. He drew it out like a box, and he was like, okay, in these 3 diagrams, this prenup, like I do better than you. And in this box, you do better than me in this prenup. Well, we ended up in the box where I would have done better than him in the prenup, financially speaking, and I never signed it. So I am one of those people who really I didn't do myself any favors by not signing a prenup. So just sharing that as an anecdotal piece of evidence that prenups can be a win for, yes.
Yes.
And my brilliant ex-husband said that contracts are not for the day that everything goes great, right? Like contracts are there for the days that things don't go how you think they're going to go. And when you are triggered and upset and all of your intergenerational stuff is being inflamed, this is not the time to have a financial negotiation conversation. You want to have pre-negotiated that. So I am like a big advocate of prenup agreements.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You're absolutely, well, he's right. I don't know if he's right about anything else, but he's right about that. I'm a woman's woman. Okay, great. Okay.
Great.
Whatever you say, I'm with. But yeah, you don't get car insurance like thinking you're going to get in a car accident, right? Like we still get car insurance. We still get home insurance or earthquake insurance. We're not like thinking about the earthquake. So yeah, it's the times that stuff goes wrong that you're going to want that pre-negotiated. And those snapshots that you talked about, like those snapshots change. Like, somebody, boss bitch true life. Like, okay, so, he, God forbid something happened to him. Like it could have been those little boxes I'm sure he outlined or you guys talked about where like somebody made more money or you guys, lasted a certain amount of time. You don't know what's going to happen. Ultimately, that type of stuff, you don't want the state to decide. And that's how I get most people to get on board with it. Because like for probate, when somebody dies, like it's all a bureaucratic nightmare. And if you don't have one, like the state that you live in decides what's going to happen in the dissolution of your marriage.
Like especially with kids, it's like just handle that when things are loving, handle that when emotions are calm. That's when you want to negotiate that stuff.
Have a naked.
Yes, do it in a bathtub. Something
financial
like your client.
Foreplay. Let's go.
Ooh, financial foreplay. Can that be your next course? Should we teach that course together?
Yes. Yes.
Wait, yes. Then we're on to something here. You heard it here first, kids. Financial foreplay.
I love that.
This is great. Yeah.
Yes.
Me
too. I'm serious.
Too. I am too. Like I'm like, oh, we could teach people like pleasure prayer on like a bed full of money and they can manifest their dreams together. Yes. Oh my God. And bring us full circle into compound interest being orgasmic. Now we'll have people orgasm their way to their dreams.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure that people are so deeply in love with you. I'm sure that people are going to want to follow you. So you're obviously have your amazing podcast, Money Rehab, which everyone should follow. You're on Instagram. If someone wanted to start with, like, which of your amazing books would you recommend people start with?
Well, thank you so much, Emily. I'm so grateful for all of your beautiful, kind words. I would recommend if you're just starting at the beginning, and that was my first book, Rich Bitch. And
do you need to be a bitch? Like, do you need to be a woman? Is it, or can people of all genders get something out of it?
I love seeing photos of men reading it too, because the advice is agnostic. But as you know, for media, like you can't be all things to all people or nothing to anyone. And especially for books. And like the data shows that men don't buy business or finance books written by women. And most women buy books. And so it just made sense to me. This is a different podcast, but like I had 4 book proposals over 10 years and like 4 false starts. And I thought that I was never going to get a book. And looking back, they would have been dead on arrival. One was called Making Bank. I just found the proposal recently, which was like all things cool finance for everybody. And it would have been terrible. But yes, I never expected writing more than that. And I became a writer, just not the kind I expected. There was a little bit of like sneak attack poetry for anyone who cares, but yes, you'll hear about like my dating stories. There are a lot of confessions. It's all the ways I've messed up along the way. So it's a combination of memoir and how to. Boss Bitch is more about getting your career together. Becoming Superwoman is, what I alluded to around finding balance from burnout, and Miss Independent is the most advanced, which is how to start investing and grow your own wealth. And then you can listen to Money Rehab literally every day. It is a daily podcast.
So 7 days a week or 5 days a week?
It's 5 new episodes a week and then 2 encore episodes or extra episodes.
Jess, that is really impressive. How do you do that? Like, that could be a whole nother podcast. How do you make 5 podcasts a week? Girl?
Well, I also have one with Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, and that's a career show twice a week called Help Wanted.
Cool. And you have your own podcast network, correct?
And I have a whole network.
I'm so impressed with you. You're such an inspiration. Truly, I think about you, I'm just like, Nicole is just rocking it so hard. So truly, thank you for dedicating so much of your time and your brilliance to helping us be boss bitches and rich bitches and Miss Independence and just financial literate people of all genders. And is there a website where we should send people where all of this is all in one spot?
Yeah. themoneyschool.com is where you can get a bunch of resources too. A lot of like worksheets and fun stuff. Yeah.
And I'm on your mailing list, so I've been getting a lot of your AI. I know you've been dipping into like AI and investing, so definitely want to, because I had not put that together. The AI is going to take the emotion out of it. And so, you've quoted Warren Buffett a lot, where it's like where other people are fearful, be greedy, and where other people are greedy, be fearful. Right? So it's like AI is going to do that math for you and take your emotion out of it, it seems.
That's right.
So yeah, exciting. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for joining me on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? And sweet friends, if you have enjoyed it as much as I have, please do follow Nicole. Truly, like everything she puts out is just like so valuable. And if you've enjoyed this, maybe screenshot it, tag us on Instagram, let us know what you thought, share this media as medicine with your friends, because we want to get, and pardon the gender on this, but we want to get the good guys rich, right? Like if you're listening to this podcast, I know that you are someone who is wanting to bring the frequency of heaven to earth. And as Nicole said, goals have price tags. And so let's get you so outrageously abundant. Let's get you feeling like you can do anything and that you have the financial lubrication to do that, because we want the spiritual team bliss very, very well financially lubricated, so that we can bring the frequency of heaven to earth together. So I love you, and I will see you next week on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This?